Good afternoon. It's great to be here. I want to start off by thanking the CannaTech organizers. I think of myself as a CannaTech veteran. This is my third conference, and very proud to actually have Ras Ivy here with me. I had asked him to accompany me to Israel on my second conference, so he's going to be here just for a few comments. Just grab a seat. When you think about cannabis, when you think about Jamaica, when you think about ganja, the natural is for everyone to reflect on Bob Marley, who is an international messenger for Jamaica. And one of the approaches that I've taken is to ensure that the local indigenous community in Jamaica is part of the process that we've been able to develop in Jamaica. I'm an attorney by background, 25 years, legal and regulatory. Started off with the Department of Justice Canada. My initial years were actually prosecuting possession cases and trafficking cases. And after that, I ended up deregulating telecommunications in Jamaica and then carried that through the Caribbean. So when I saw the evolution of the cannabis industry 5 years ago, it just seemed as a natural to me that Jamaica should have a position in that. So what I've been able to do is look at how do I bring about change or transformation in Jamaica. And my vision for it has always been, from the very first business plan that I developed with my team 5 years ago, was I saw Jamaica as a country with just a huge amount of cannabis already growing. For example, according to, it would be interesting hearing the gentlemen that were here before, according to the US government, we've got about 20,000 hectares of ganja that's growing in Jamaica today. Jamaica is very interesting in that we're one of the first countries in the world that actually removed medical marijuana from the definition of ganja. And this was back in 1986. So there was a lot of visionaries that saw the possibility that this was going to bring, including the individuals that we just spoke about, Bob Marley and Peter Tosh. So about 5 years ago, I approached Mark Golding, who was at the time the Minister of Justice in Jamaica, and we came up with a strategy to develop a legal and regulatory framework for cannabis. Fortunately for us, on April 24th, of 2016, that legislation was passed, and we now have a legal and regulatory framework. One of the moments that I'm very pleased is having the opportunity to plant the first legal plant in Jamaica in 102 years with the Minister of Justice at the time, Mark Golding, at the University of the West Indies. And this signaled the start of a legal industry in Jamaica. Jamaica has now become a leader, and we'll talk a little bit about what that framework is. But the vision, as I see it, similar to telecom, is it's going to become a Caricom Initiative. And so we have Caricom, which is a Caribbean organization of Common Economic Union, now coming on board, different countries. We've got Trinidad looking at it, we've got St. Lucia, we've got Grenada, many other countries, Turks and Caicos, are now looking at how do they develop a legal and regulatory framework for cannabis. As a lawyer, I find this to be one of the most fascinating areas, because what you have is each of these countries are kind of looking at things within their own local environment and not fully, in my view, taking account of what the international implications are. With the legislation that was passed in 2015, it was critical that a cannabis licensing authority be part of that regulatory framework. The difference in medical marijuana, and according to the United Nations treaties, you have to have a framework where there is a regulator and all of that is laid out. So we were able to put in place the Cannabis Licensing Authority. Ras Ivy is actually a member of that authority. He sits representing the Rastafarian community. And so the responsibility of the Cannabis Licensing Authority in Jamaica is to issue licenses. There are different categories of licenses that that are there. You've got cultivators licenses, you've got processing license, transport license, retail, research and development, and other licenses. And the Cannabis Licensing Authority, which has been expanded recently in terms of staff, etc., is leading that charge. I think Rasavi was just telling me today, we've got 29 licenses issued so far, and I think there's over 250 applications that are pending. So you have an industry that, in my view, is moving forward, though initially there's some challenges that took place, changes in governments, etc., that kind of slowed down the process a little bit. We were very pleased. Our company, Timeless Herbal Care, we were the first company who actually received a research and development permit in Jamaica. And what that did was it allowed us to begin the process of examining how this industry is going to develop. It's critical that as each of the countries, in my view, begin to look at their legal and regulatory framework, that you look at the component of research and development. International laws allow you to do that, and even here in Panama, as I've looked at some of the legal framework and the legislation, research and development is just a great way to get your industry going. You're not going to get the resistance that you will in many other situations. This was a moment, again, that I'd share with you. This was a very pleasant moment for us. We were one of the first two companies in Jamaica to actually be granted a cultivation license. On the left is Minister Audley Shaw, who's now responsible for cannabis, and on the right is Mr. Staples, who at the time was the head of the Cannabis Licensing Authority. And so what we've been doing for the last year is actual cultivating. We've gone through 4 crops, and that process is now growing and expanding in Jamaica. Following the growing, one of the things that I think is that each country really has to look at what are their strengths, right? If I look at Panama, for example, Panama has got an incredible industry here, potentially in extractions, generic development of drugs. St. Kitts, other countries, they're all looking at how can they get involved in the industry. The starting point is to see what is your local strength. Jamaica, again, we have this large amount of plant material which exist. Our vision for Jamaica was really to turn that into extracted oil and to be able to bring that to the world. Along the way, we were able to partner with one of the top companies of the United States, Open Vape, who essentially came down, and they're existing in about 12 states now in the United States, and began the process of laying the foundation for us to be able to produce products such as the oil that you see there under the Open Vape brand, which is now being sold in Jamaica. We've also gone to the extent of dispensaries. So we've moved quite far in Jamaica right now. So when you're in Montego Bay, you can visit island strains. I've been to dispensaries all over the world. In my view, there's nothing that comes close. This is what you're going to see on the back end of that dispensary, which is overlooking the beach. So they've got a tremendous opportunity in now bringing that product to market. So Jamaica has gone from research and development, we've gone from cultivation, we've gone processing, and now we've got retail. And then the final part of it is really the export industry. I mean, I think in many countries, especially for Jamaica, where you already have the large amount of cannabis and you have a local population that is now being served, you've got to figure out the business model is to get that product outside the country. And we're very pleased. It took a lot of work and a lot of support from the government of Jamaica, primarily Minister Audley Shaw, and also the Minister of Health, Minister Tufton. We worked along with Health Canada, because in any country that you bring your product in, and that's one of the challenges, you've got to make sure that you comply with the other countries' regulations. So we're very pleased that in October of 2018, we were able to receive an import permit from Health Canada. We then took that import permit to the government of Jamaica, and we were able to receive an export permit that allowed us to make the first legal shipment from Jamaica to Canada. What was great about that is we sent our extracted oil, and we're able to meet all of the certificate of analysis requirements of Health Canada, because that's, again, the key part of it. Many people think you're actually selling something that's going to be good for many different purposes, but at the end of the day, it's your certificate of analysis that you're selling when you're starting to deal with the international market. So this was a major breakthrough for us, and very pleased to have been part of that, and we did it in compliance with the international treaties. One of my commitments in Jamaica, and it's great to hear Lauren speak about it this morning, is the whole issue is how do you get involved the local communities? And so when the process began, and Ross Ivy is going to speak a little bit about it, one of the challenges that we had is the business that we're in, all of us, is actually very capital intensive. I mean, to get to the stages that we had required a tremendous amount of investment. So here in Jamaica now, you have the local farmers who have been cultivating for years and years. How do we get them involved in the industry? And one of the things that I'm really proud of is we developed in Jamaica what's called an alternative development program, which is looking at certainly the business, the international requirements, but more importantly, how do we get local farmers that have been farming for over 100 years, how do we get them involved in the industry? And so working along again with the Cannabis Licensing Authority, working along with the Minister of Agriculture, Audley Shaw, the Prime Minister of Jamaica on January the 6th of this year officially launched the Alternative Development Program, which allows communities such as the Rastafarian community in Orange Hill to be able to grow to protocols, and they've got to meet the standard requirements, etc., as well as the Maroons community, who are the indigenous community in Jamaica that controls over 17,000 acres and has farmers that's been growing for many years, to now become a part of that system, in that they've got to meet the compliance, etc., but they're now able to sell to a licensed producer, and we're helping them along the way in developing the systems. For example, seed-to-sale tracking system. We've got to track the product. You've got to look at all the things, general agricultural practice, to make sure that as they're growing in the way that they've traditionally done, there's a little bit of tweaking that may be required to make sure that they meet international requirements. I'm just going to have Ross Ivy just say a few words on this, because they've just signed a significant deal, I think it was last week, with a Canadian company dealing with the Rastafarian community and how they're now going to become part of the international element of this industry from Jamaica.
Yes, first let me say greetings to everyone, Rastafari. I have to give thanks for being here and give thanks for the work that CannaTech has been doing, being there in 2017 in Tel Aviv in Israel. One of our concerns as a Rastaman all along is that our rights were continually being violated by the states. And we have always been saying that if the Christians have the right to use bread and wine in their church, who is the state to deny us using a plant as our sacrament? So we've been marching, writing letters for years. Just like Courtney pointed out, the laws were amended in 2015, and grassroots people were given the right to participate in the industry, because that was one of our concerns, that with the legalization, big companies would come in, and most of these people who have borne the brunt of the persecution would have been pushed out of the business. So in January, the Prime Minister made a statement, and now 2 pilot projects, one the Maroon, one in Orange Hill, of which basically I have spearheaded the setting up of, so we set up the Westmoreland Ganja Farmers Association and encourage other parishes to do the same. At the moment, we are still concerned because there is still a stigma that is attached to this plant. So it needs education, and as such, not just from a Jamaican or a Caricom point of view, but we need the international community. We need that support from the international community in order to counteract the stigmatization that has been attached to the plant. We still have concern in the sense that, yes, we have been given the right to grow. We have been, grassroots people have the right now to come together and produce. But our concern is still, how do we market our product internationally without the interference of the big states? So we still give thanks, knowing that the time is running out, but we still give thanks for the year. Every December we keep an event that is geared towards educating our people. It's called Rastafari Roots Fest, about the benefit of herb from a medical point of view. So the time is running out, but again, give thanks to the year, and looking forward to the international support in order to counteract the stigmatization that has been attached to this plant over the years. Thank
you, Rasavi. I think one of the main things I want to leave... One of the things I want to leave as well is the Rastafarian community and the Maroons community have come together in unity. Together, they now have the largest cultivation capacity in the Caribbean. There's no other company that's going to be close to what they're doing right now. And these are the two pilot projects that the Prime Minister has began with that are separate from all I've talked to you about, the licensing requirements and the limitations there. And so it's a great opportunity for companies that want to work with those communities to be able to get access to a tremendous amount of quality plant material. So where are we at?
Made a lot of individuals to allow for what is called the Alternative Development Program for ganja, because it is a real fear that as that industry emerges to become more corporatized, that the original ganja man, the original farmer, could very well be left out of the gains and the benefits when you were the one singing the praises and know the benefits from how long. I made sure to call the Minister of Agriculture, and I had a word with him. And he gave me a commitment that within the first quarter of this year, that the Alternative Development Program for the small farmers, the small ganja farmers, to produce for the legal trade, that will start in the first quarter of this year.
And I think what's really important about that, I mean, I've been working at this for 5 years. January 6th, 2019 was the first time that the Prime Minister actually spoke on this issue. And what does it mean? He spoke on this issue because he now has the confidence at the direction that it's going in. It was great this morning. I go to conferences all over, and the last one I spoke at was in Jamaica. And one of the things I think personally is severely lacking is the whole issue of corporate social responsibility. We have it in all other industries, but it's interesting that in the cannabis industry, we hardly hear about it. And that's one of the elements that I think for all of us that as we're looking at developing these industries, and we're hearing it's going to be $1 trillion industry, and all that is really great. We're going to be successful. We're all business individuals, but let's not lose sight, especially where you're going into countries that have traditionally been exploited or taken advantage of. Because at the end of the day, if you're not there and you're not protecting those local communities, your business is going to fail. And again, the other element is partnerships. You've got the University of West Indies in Jamaica, and you've got the University of Technology. There's a tremendous amount of work that is going to get that element of collaboration. It's not an easy task. I mean, I'm not trying to paint this sort of rosy picture that everything is great. There's a lot of work that is continuing, but at least I can say today as I stand here that I believe that Jamaica is on the right path, and as Caricom moves forward, the next step is going to be for us to reach out to our brothers and sisters in Colombia and Panama and all the other Latin American countries to see how we can now unite to bring our products to the world. That's what the European Union is doing, and we've got to begin to lay that framework. Again, I want to thank you. Very special to be able to share this with Ross Ivy, and we welcome you to Jamaica. Whenever you're there, visit our dispensary in Montego Bay. I'm sure you'll have a great time. Thank you again.
Yeah, good time.
Thank you, Ross Ivy. Thank you, Courtney.